Picture this. 15,000 years ago, the world is locked in ice. Massive glaciers stretch across continents like frozen oceans, and between Asia and North America lies a bridge of land that today rests beneath the Bering Sea. Across this bridge, small bands of humans are making one of the most audacious journeys in our species' history, walking into a completely unknown continent. Now, when I say it was cold, I mean times cold asterisk. We're talking about temperatures that would kill you in hours if you weren't prepared. Imagine stepping outside on the coldest winter day you've ever experienced, then dropping the temperature another 30 degrees. That's a Tuesday afternoon on the Bering Land Bridge. These weren't people bundled up in modern winter gear, heading to a heated car. These were families carrying everything they owned, walking into a landscape that could freeze the breath in their lungs. Among these travelers, let's imagine a young woman named Ashka. Now, Ashka isn't a historical figure you'll find in any textbook. She's what historians call a composite character, representing the countless unnamed innovators whose discoveries shaped human survival. But her story captures something very real that happened during this incredible migration. Ashka has been watching. That's what separates innovators from everyone else. They notice things. She's noticed how the massive brown bears they occasionally encounter seem to disappear for months at a time, only to emerge healthy and well-fed from snow-covered mounds. While others in her band worry about finding these bears, Ashka is studying their dens. One day, following bear tracks, she discovers something remarkable. The den isn't just a hole in the ground, it's engineered. The entrance slopes downward, then curves upward into a circular chamber. Warm air, being lighter than cold air, stays trapped in that dome, while the heavier cold air sinks out through the entrance. It's a thermal trap, as effective as any modern heating system. Standing in that bear den, feeling how much warmer it is than the brutal world outside, Ashka has one of those moments that changes everything. She realizes that shape matters. The curved walls don't just hold up earth, they hold heat. Square corners, like the simple shelters her people have always built, leak precious warmth into the sky. But curves embrace heat like a mother's arms. Now, you have to understand what this discovery means for survival. Before this innovation, keeping warm meant burning enormous amounts of wood if you could find it. Families spent 6 hours daily just gathering fuel, leaving little time for anything else. 6 hours. That's most of your daylight, every single day, just to not freeze to death. But with Ashka's curved lodge design, something miraculous happens. The dome shape creates perfect air circulation. Warm air rises to the top, circulates along the curved walls, and gently descends, creating a continuous flow that distributes heat evenly throughout the space. No more shivering in corners while the fire burns uselessly in the center. The innovation goes deeper than just survival. It becomes sacred. As her tribe begins building these dome lodges, they notice something profound. The circular form mirrors the sun's path across the sky. The curved walls echo the cycle of seasons, the roundness of the moon, the wholeness of life itself. What began as practical engineering becomes spiritual architecture. Through generations of refinement, these early architects discover what we now call the golden ratio, a mathematical relationship between height and width that creates perfect thermal efficiency. They don't have our equations or computer models, but they have something perhaps more valuable: thousands of years of life and death experimentation. Every generation builds on the knowledge of the last, fine-tuning proportions until they achieve thermal perfection. The innovations multiply. They develop thermal mass floors made of carefully packed earth and selected stones. During the day, these floors absorb heat from the fire and the warmth of bodies moving above. Through the bitter nights, when outside temperatures plummet to deadly lows, the floor radiates that stored heat back into the living space. It's a thermal battery, charging by day and powering comfort through the night. But perhaps the most sophisticated innovation is airflow control. These early engineers develop adjustable smoke flaps at the top of their lodges, precision instruments for managing convection currents. By adjusting these flaps, they create a perfect system. Fresh air enters low near the fire, heats up, rises to circulate around the dome, and carries smoke and stale air out through the top opening. It's environmental control that rivals modern HVAC systems. The impact on daily life is revolutionary. Instead of spending 6 hours gathering fuel, families now need only 2 hours. Those extra 4 hours daily transform everything. Men have time to craft superior hunting tools. Women can perfect intricate beadwork that becomes trade currency. Children learn through stories told around fires that burn steadily through long winter nights. Elders have time to study star patterns, developing astronomical knowledge that guides navigation and marks seasonal changes. This is efficiency that creates wealth, not wealth in gold or silver, but wealth in time, in comfort, in survival itself. Families living in properly designed lodges emerge from harsh winters healthy and strong, while those without this knowledge struggle just to survive. The mathematical precision hidden in these ancient structures is staggering. Modern engineers, using sophisticated computer modeling, have discovered that traditional lodge proportions achieve optimal thermal efficiency, not just good, but times optimal asterisk. These weren't primitive shelters. They were masterpieces of environmental engineering developed through millennia of rigorous testing, where failure meant death. Each lodge becomes a small miracle of physics. The curved walls create laminar airflow that prevents heat loss. The optimal height-to-width ratio ensures maximum heat retention while preventing dangerous carbon monoxide buildup. The strategic placement of thermal mass stores and releases energy with clockwork precision. As winter storms rage outside with temperatures that can kill in minutes, families inside these remarkable structures stay warm, wearing minimal clothing. Children playing comfortably on floors that radiate gentle heat, elders telling stories that preserve thousands of years of accumulated wisdom. But this is just the beginning of our story. These fundamental discoveries, thermal mass, airflow dynamics, the power of curved spaces will spread across an entire continent, sparking innovations that make these early lodges look simple by comparison. From the Arctic ice to the desert southwest, different peoples will take these basic principles and create thermal miracles that would astound modern engineers. The question is, how did knowledge this sophisticated spread across thousands of miles of unmapped wilderness? And what happened when these master builders encountered challenges that would test their ancient wisdom like never before? Now, fast forward several thousand years from Ashka's revolutionary dome, what began as one woman's observation of bear dens has exploded across an entire continent into a flowering of thermal genius that would make modern engineers weep with envy. We're talking about innovations so sophisticated, so perfectly adapted to their environments, that they represent some of the finest examples of sustainable architecture in human history. Let's start in the Arctic, where the very idea of staying warm seems impossible. Picture this. It's minus 50 degrees outside. The wind is howling at 60 miles per hour, driving ice crystals that can blind you in seconds. In conditions like this, exposed human skin freezes solid in under 2 minutes. And yet, inside an igloo built by an Inuit family, it's a comfortable 50 degrees above zero. Think about that for a moment. We're talking about a 90-degree temperature difference created by nothing more than blocks of ice and human body heat. No furnace, no electricity, no fossil fuels, just the thermal properties of snow and the brilliant engineering of people who understood their environment better than we understand ours. Here's what's happening inside that igloo that seems to defy physics. The Inuit builders know that fresh snow is actually an incredible insulator. It's mostly trapped air, the same principle we use in modern insulation, just organized differently. But here's the genius part. They're building with blocks cut from wind-packed snow that has exactly the right density. Too loose, and it won't hold structural integrity. Too dense, and it loses insulating properties. They've found the sweet spot through generations of life and death trial and error. The construction technique is pure artistry. Each block is carefully shaped so that the igloo's walls lean inward as they rise, creating a perfect dome without any internal support. The final capstone block, it's cut from inside the igloo and fitted from below, a construction technique that would challenge modern builders with power tools. But the real magic happens when they light that single seal oil lamp. The lamp's heat warms the inner surface of the ice blocks just enough to create a thin layer of melt, which immediately refreezes into a hard, smooth glaze. This glaze becomes a vapor barrier that prevents moisture from escaping while creating an incredibly durable inner shell. The igloo literally strengthens itself as it's heated. Now let's travel south to the Great Plains, where we encounter a completely different but equally brilliant solution to thermal engineering. Here, the Lakota people have perfected the teepee, and when I say perfected, I mean they've created a structure that modern tent manufacturers still can't improve upon. The teepee's tilted cone shape isn't just aesthetically pleasing, it's aerodynamically perfect. When those legendary prairie winds come howling across the plains at 40 or 50 miles per hour, they hit the teepee's sloped sides and get deflected up and over, creating a low-pressure zone that actually helps hold the structure down. Meanwhile, those same winds that would destroy a square building just make the teepee more stable. But let's talk about a true master builder. Gentle Rain, a Crow woman whose architectural knowledge was legendary among the Plains tribes. Gentle Rain understood something that modern builders are just rediscovering: that thermal efficiency requires thinking in 3 dimensions about how heat moves through space. She taught her daughters that buffalo hide selection was a science. The hide from a buffalo's back, thick and dense, goes at the bottom of the teepee, where cold air pools. The thinner hide from the animal's sides goes higher up, where rising heat needs to escape. Each hide is positioned based on its thermal properties, creating a gradient of insulation that manages heat flow with surgical precision. Inside the teepee, Gentle Rain creates what we would now call a thermal envelope within a thermal envelope. She hangs interior linings called dew cloth that create dead air spaces between the outer wall and the living area. These air gaps provide insulation more effective than modern fiberglass batting, while the dew cloth itself channels condensation down to the ground instead of letting it drip on sleeping families. The fire management inside a teepee represents heating technology that's both ancient and ultra-modern. The fire pit is precisely positioned to create optimal convection currents. Fresh air enters at ground level, heats up, rises to circulate around the cone's interior, and exits through adjustable smoke flaps at the top. It's a perfectly engineered system that provides even heating, smoke removal, and fresh air circulation, all controlled by tiny adjustments to the top opening. Now travel east to the longhouses of the Iroquois nations, where we encounter apartment living that predates Manhattan by centuries. These structures house multiple families in what are essentially apartments within apartments, each with its own thermal zone while sharing heating resources. Picture a longhouse stretching 200 feet in length, housing 20 families. Each family has its own fire, but the engineering is so sophisticated that smoke from 20 fires exits cleanly through roof openings, while heat circulates throughout the entire structure. The Iroquois architects achieve this through careful attention to air pressure differentials and convection currents that would challenge modern HVAC engineers. But perhaps the most mind-blowing thermal engineering happens in the southwest, where the ancestral Puebloans, the people we used to call the Anasazi, built directly into cliffsides. These aren't just houses, they're integrated thermal systems that use the earth itself as a heating and cooling mechanism. The thermal mass principle here operates on a massive scale. The cliff face absorbs solar energy all day long, storing it in millions of tons of stone. As evening temperatures drop, that stored energy radiates back into the living spaces, providing heat through the night. In summer, the same thermal mass stays cool, absorbing excess heat from living spaces and keeping interiors comfortable when outside temperatures soar above 100 degrees. Let's talk numbers for a moment, because the efficiency gains are staggering. A traditional European cabin of this period requires approximately 5 cords of wood to heat through a winter that's a stack of wood, 4 feet high, 4 feet wide, and 40 feet long. 5 cords. Meanwhile, a properly designed native ripper-side our lodge uses about 1 cord for the same heating. That's an 80% improvement in fuel efficiency. But efficiency creates more than just comfort. It creates economic advantage. When you need 4 fewer cords of wood, that's hundreds of hours not spent chopping, hauling, and stacking fuel. Those hours become trade goods, intricate beadwork, superior hunting tools, processed hides, crafted pottery. Thermal efficiency literally creates wealth. This also means political power. Master builders like Gentle Rain become incredibly valuable during migrations or seasonal moves. A skilled architect who can construct a warm, comfortable lodge in just a few hours using local materials becomes indispensable to tribal leadership. These aren't just craftspeople, they're strategic assets. The knowledge transfer systems these cultures developed are as sophisticated as their building techniques. Construction knowledge is encoded in songs, stories, and ceremonies that ensure precise information passes between generations. A building song might sound like entertainment, but it's actually a mnemonic device, preserving exact ratios, material specifications, and construction sequences. Imagine if modern building codes were preserved in songs that children learned while playing. That's exactly what these cultures achieved, making essential technical knowledge so embedded in daily life that it became virtually impossible to lose. But this incredible tradition of thermal innovation faces its greatest challenge yet. European colonists are arriving with advanced metal tools and sophisticated weapons, but they're bringing building techniques that are, frankly, primitive compared to what they're encountering. And they're about to impose those inferior methods on people who have spent thousands of years perfecting the art of staying warm. The collision between these two worldviews, one that has mastered harmony with thermal dynamics, another that conquers through brute force energy consumption, will determine not just who stays warm, but who survives the coming centuries of cultural upheaval. The irony is so bitter you can taste it in the winter air. Picture this scene. It's 1647. Somewhere in what will become Massachusetts. European colonists, equipped with steel axes, iron nails, and what they consider advanced building techniques, are freezing to death in hastily constructed log cabins. Meanwhile, less than a mile away, a Wampanoag family sits comfortably in their traditional lodge, warm and healthy, using a fraction of the fuel their European neighbors are burning. The colonists are consuming entire forests just to survive their first winters. We're talking about a level of environmental destruction that's hard to comprehend. Thousands of acres of old-growth timber reduced to ash just to keep poorly insulated cabins barely habitable. These European-style buildings are thermal disasters, square corners that leak heat like sieves, massive gaps between logs, no understanding of thermal mass or airflow dynamics. But here's what's truly tragic about this scene. The Europeans have better tools, but they're using them to build inferior shelters. They have iron axes that can fell trees faster than stone tools ever could, but they're wasting that advantage on construction techniques that haven't evolved in centuries. It's like watching someone use a Ferrari to pull a cart. Now, you might think that exposure to superior native building techniques would create a natural technology transfer. Smart people see better methods and adopt them, right? But that's not what happens. Instead, we get one of history's most devastating examples of willful ignorance destroying accumulated knowledge. The Europeans aren't just ignoring native thermal engineering, they're actively suppressing it. Government agents and missionaries begin forcing tribes to abandon their efficient lodges for what they call proper housing. Proper housing, in this case, means drafty wooden structures that require massive amounts of fuel and provide minimal comfort. The human cost is immediate and devastating. Death rates on reservations soar as families are forced from warm, healthy lodges into poorly designed government housing. We're talking about preventable deaths from cold-related illnesses, pneumonia, hypothermia, respiratory infections striking down people whose ancestors had solved these problems millennia ago. But here's where the story gets both heartbreaking and inspiring, because you can't suppress thousands of years of knowledge without resistance. That resistance comes from an unexpected source: grandmothers. Throughout Indian country, elderly women begin operating underground schools. These aren't formal institutions, they're secret gatherings, where traditional building knowledge is passed down despite laws forbidding primitive construction methods. Picture a grandmother named Singing Wolf, working by firelight in a hidden lodge, teaching her granddaughters the sacred proportions that create perfect thermal efficiency. These women are risking imprisonment to preserve knowledge that could save their people's lives. They're encoding construction secrets in lullabies, hiding thermal engineering principles in traditional stories, disguising architectural wisdom as recipes or craft instructions. It's intellectual resistance on a massive scale. The environmental destruction spreading across the continent is staggering when you calculate the real numbers. Traditional native lodges, as we established, use about 1 cord of wood per winter. European-style buildings consume 5 cords. As inefficient European building methods spread across a continent, we're looking at millions of additional acres being deforested annually, forests that traditional methods would never have required. But the loss goes beyond trees. We're watching the destruction of architectural knowledge that took 15,000 years to develop. Imagine if modern computer science or medical knowledge was being systematically erased, while inferior methods were imposed by force. That's what's happening to thermal engineering wisdom that was, in many ways, more sophisticated than what Europeans brought. Some communities develop brilliant strategies of hidden compliance. They build structures that appear to meet government requirements, while secretly incorporating traditional thermal principles. A reservation house might look like a standard European cabin from the outside, but inside, it uses indigenous airflow management, thermal mass principles, and heat circulation patterns. Its architectural code switching appearing to conform while preserving essential knowledge. A government inspector sees a proper wooden house, but the family inside enjoys traditional thermal comfort through invisible engineering modifications. The knowledge keepers during this period are heroes whose names history rarely records. They're often women who understand that their people's survival depends on preserving building techniques that could be the difference between life and death during harsh winters. These grandmothers and aunties create hidden libraries of thermal efficiency, passing down precise ratios, material specifications, and construction methods through carefully protected oral traditions. One such keeper is Mary Stands Tall, a Lakota woman who spent 60 years documenting traditional building songs in her memory while pretending to have forgotten them entirely. During reservation inspections, she would nod along when agents praised the progress of families moving into government housing. But at night, she taught children the songs that encoded teepee construction ratios, thermal mass calculations, and airflow management techniques. The psychological warfare of this period is as devastating as the physical hardship. Government policies aren't just forcing inferior building methods, they're attacking the very identity of master builders. Imagine being Gentle Rain's granddaughter, knowing you possess architectural knowledge that could revolutionize heating efficiency, but being forbidden to use it because it's considered primitive. The forced transition creates a generation of hidden architects, people who understand sophisticated thermal engineering, but must pretend ignorance to avoid punishment. They watch their relatives suffer in cold, inefficient housing while possessing the knowledge to solve every problem. Some communities try to document their architectural knowledge in writing, creating secret technical manuals that preserve construction details in European languages and formats. These hidden manuscripts become incredibly dangerous possessions, evidence of regression that could bring severe penalties. But perhaps the most heartbreaking scene of this entire period is watching elders observe their grandchildren shivering in of government houses, forbidden from building the warm lodges that could save them. Picture an old man named Thunder Horse, standing outside a drafty reservation cabin where his daughter's family huddles around an inadequate wood stove, knowing he could construct a lodge that would keep them comfortable with half the fuel, but federal law makes such construction illegal. The irony compounds daily. European settlers continue freezing in their inefficient cabins, burning forests at unsustainable rates, while the knowledge to solve their problems exists in the communities they're suppressing. It's like destroying antibiotics while dying of infection. Yet through all this systematic destruction, something remarkable happens. The knowledge doesn't die. Hidden in songs, disguised as stories, encoded in seemingly innocent craft traditions, the wisdom of 15,000 years of thermal engineering survives in the minds and hearts of people who refuse to let it disappear. But survival isn't the same as thriving. As the 19th century progresses into the 20th, traditional building knowledge becomes increasingly disconnected from practical application. Master builders grow old without being able to pass on their skills through hands-on construction. Knowledge that was once living, breathing, constantly refined through daily use becomes academic preserved but not practiced. The question becomes, can knowledge this sophisticated survive generations of suppression? And what will it take to bring ancient thermal wisdom back to life in a world that desperately needs sustainable solutions to energy consumption? The answer lies waiting in the most unexpected place: the space program. The year is 1996, and inside a sterile conference room at NASA's Johnson Space Center, a team of engineers faces an impossible challenge. They're designing habitats for Mars colonization, and the problems seem insurmountable. How do you create livable space in an environment where outside temperatures swing from -140 degrees to +70 degrees? How do you maintain thermal comfort while minimizing energy consumption when every ounce of fuel must be transported 26 million miles? The engineers have tried everything: advanced materials, computer-controlled heating systems, sophisticated insulation technologies. Nothing works efficiently enough. They need solutions that are lightweight, durable, energy efficient, and capable of maintaining human comfort in extreme conditions with minimal resources. Then Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a thermal dynamics specialist, makes a suggestion that changes everything. She's been reading about traditional Native American architecture, and she thinks there might be solutions hiding in indigenous building techniques. Her colleagues are skeptical: what could primitive structures possibly teach space-age engineers? But when they run computer models analyzing traditional lodge designs, the results are absolutely stunning. These ancient structures solve every single challenge of extreme climate survival with minimal resources. The curved walls create perfect airflow dynamics. The thermal mass principles store and release energy with clockwork precision. The ventilation systems manage air quality and temperature using nothing but physics and intelligent design. Suddenly, NASA engineers realize they're not pioneers. They're rediscovering solutions that indigenous architects perfected thousands of years ago. This revelation sparks something much larger than space program innovation. Around the same time, a young Lakota woman named Tamara Eagle Bull is finishing her architecture degree and asking hard questions about why modern buildings are so incredibly inefficient. She's grown up hearing stories from her grandmother about the old lodges, how families stayed warm all winter using just fallen branches while their neighbors burned cords of wood in drafty houses. Tamara decides to bridge ancient wisdom with contemporary building techniques. She begins designing modern structures that incorporate traditional thermal principles: curved walls that embrace heat, strategic thermal mass placement, natural ventilation systems that move air without mechanical assistance. Her first major project is a community center on the Pine Ridge Reservation, and the results are revolutionary. The building reduces heating costs by 60% compared to conventional construction. 60%. We're talking about a structure that maintains comfortable temperatures through brutal South Dakota winters while using less energy than a typical suburban house. The design incorporates earth berming for thermal mass, curved interior walls for optimal heat circulation, and sophisticated passive ventilation that eliminates the need for mechanical air handling. But the impact goes far beyond energy savings. For the first time in generations, families are gathering in a space that feels like the traditional lodges their ancestors built. Children play in rooms where heat circulates naturally, where the very shape of the walls seems to embrace them. Elders sit comfortably without layers of clothing, remembering how their grandparents described the old ways. Word spreads quickly through architectural communities. Firms from Norway to New Zealand begin studying indigenous thermal principles and implementing them in modern construction. A passive house designer in Germany discovers that traditional lodge proportions create optimal energy efficiency. A sustainable architect in Japan realizes that ancient ventilation techniques eliminate the need for costly mechanical systems. The global impact is staggering when you run the numbers. If just 10% of new construction worldwide incorporated indigenous thermal principles, we could reduce global heating energy consumption by approximately 40 billion BTUs annually. That's enough energy to power entire cities, saved simply by building the way indigenous peoples have always built. Back on Pine Ridge, something even more important is happening. Young people are learning traditional building techniques in summer camps, their pride swelling as they realize their ancestors weren't primitive, they were engineering geniuses. 15-year-old Marcus Littlehawk shapes his first lodge frame and suddenly understands that his great-grandfather was solving complex mathematical problems with his hands. These aren't just construction workshops, they're healing ceremonies. As young people learn to build traditional structures, they're reconnecting with knowledge systems that were nearly lost. They're discovering that their ancestors understood principles that modern science is just beginning to articulate. One of the most important teachers in this revival is Joseph Stans alone, Mary Stans Tall's grandson, who spent decades secretly preserving construction knowledge that his grandmother protected through the darkest years of suppression. Now, in his 70s, Joseph teaches packed workshops where eager students from every background learn traditional building techniques. Joseph's classes are remarkable cultural exchanges. You'll find native college students learning alongside Norwegian architects, traditional knowledge keepers working with NASA engineers, grandmothers teaching computer programmers how heat moves through curved spaces. It's technology transfer in reverse, ancient wisdom flowing into modern applications. The spiritual dimension of this revival is as important as the practical benefits. When families gather again in traditional lodges, something profound happens. Children play where central fires burned for thousands of years. Stories are told in spaces shaped by ancestors who understood that building isn't just about shelter, it's about creating harmony between human needs and natural forces. Modern technology is finally sophisticated, enough to measure what grandmothers always knew. Infrared cameras reveal heat flow patterns in traditional structures that confirm intuitive knowledge passed down through generations. Computer modeling proves the mathematical perfection of traditional ratios that were preserved in songs and stories. Dr. Mitchell, the NASA engineer who first suggested studying indigenous architecture, now collaborates regularly with traditional builders. She uses advanced instruments to document thermal performance of ancient designs, creating scientific validation for knowledge that was preserved through oral tradition. Her research proves that traditional builders achieved optimal thermal efficiency through empirical testing that spanned millennia. The merger of ancient wisdom with modern tools is creating innovations that neither tradition alone could achieve. Contemporary architects use computer modeling to refine traditional proportions, while traditional builders use modern materials to create structures that honor ancient principles while meeting contemporary building codes. One particularly exciting development is happening in urban environments, where space constraints make traditional circular construction challenging. Architects are finding ways to incorporate indigenous thermal principles into apartment buildings, office complexes, and schools. An elementary school in Minneapolis uses modified lodge ventilation principles to maintain air quality without mechanical systems. An office building in Vancouver incorporates thermal mass strategies learned from ancestral Puebloan construction. But perhaps the most moving scene in this entire revival is 8-year-old Marpi building her first miniature lodge during a summer workshop at Pine Ridge. Her small hands shape willow branches the way her ancestors did for thousands of years, but her eyes shine with pride as she realizes she's not just playing, she's carrying forward knowledge that could help heal the world. Marpi represents something profound, a generation that sees no contradiction between ancient wisdom and contemporary innovation. She's learning to read thermal dynamics through traditional songs while also understanding computer modeling of heat flow. She's bilingual in ways her grandparents could never have imagined, fluent in both ancestral knowledge systems and modern technological applications. As Marpi adjusts the smoke flap on her miniature lodge, achieving perfect ventilation through techniques that predate written history, she's proving that the greatest innovations often come from looking back to leap forward. The thermal engineering wisdom that nearly died in government boarding schools and reservation housing is being reborn in the hands of children who will carry it into a future where sustainable building isn't just preferred, essential for survival. The circle is completing itself. Knowledge that began with Ashka observing bear dens 15,000 years ago, that survived suppression and forced cultural change, that was preserved in songs and stories by courageous knowledge keepers, is now being recognized as some of the most sophisticated sustainable technology ever developed. And in a world facing climate change and energy crises, these ancient solutions offer hope that human ingenuity, refined over millennia of careful observation and testing, can still show us the way forward.